Hello and welcome to Educated STEM. I am Kate, the founder of Educated STEM, and again, I am joined by Dr. Mahadeo Sukhai. So he's got a bunch of videos where we talk about his lived experience as a low vision scientist and his career. And now we're doing an absolute deep dive into his area of specialty, which is what most people call DEI. He prefers the acronym IDEA, so that is what we're going to refer to it as today. But I'm going to ask him a big, complicated question because lots of people think about DEI in many different ways. I'm going to ask him why DEI or IDEA is relevant to science. So Mahadeo.
Kate, I think that's a great question. I'm going to start by offering a slight gentle correction. I am an IDEA professional, but I'm a scientist first. And what often gets forgotten about in the work that I do is that I actually am a scientist. And I've been a scientist as long as, if not longer than, having been an IDEA professional. And so slight gentle correction. But I think it's actually germane to the question at hand. So I'm gonna start by telling a story. So imagine for a moment that you are conducting a research project and you are interested in understanding how older adults interact with and use assistive technologies. And so you are doing this via a survey, and you put a survey out into the field, and you only get, in the course of 3 weeks, 10 responses. And you wonder, why is that? And so you connect with me, and the first thing I say to you is, okay, let's have a look at your survey. And as we look at the survey, we realize, guess what? The survey is actually not that accessible to anyone who's using assistive technologies. And so all of a sudden, you have a question that is intended to benefit a whole swath of the population, older adults who use assistive technology, but you've created a tool where you didn't actually make sure that older adults with assistive technology could actually take the survey. And so we're going to work together, and we're going to figure out how to actually troubleshoot this. And we do troubleshoot this, and I tell you, you need to edit your survey in a bunch of different ways, and perhaps you need to switch your survey platform. And so you listen to me, and you go and you switch your survey platform, and you edit your survey, and you launch the survey in the in sort of that blank period of the year-end holiday period where nobody does anything, and certainly not pay attention to emails that come in from researchers. And all of a sudden, you have 950 responses between the end of December and the middle of January because you have an accessible survey. Right? And so you've paid attention to IDEA by making sure that the research question that you're asking, with intended benefits to a group of folks who are a substantive population, who are using a piece of technology or using pieces of technology that you want to influence policy and practice around, you make sure they can actually fill out your survey. Right? So there is an example of how accessibility actually matters to how you do your research project, as an example of how IDEA matters to STEM. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about a genomic variant where in certain humans, the genomic variant is identified as say a benign variant, but in other humans who have different ethnicity and different geographical background, that variant, because of various things associated with the genetics of a different human population, that particular variant is not benign, it's actually pathogenic. But in the absence of, for example, knowing geography or ethnicity information, you actually can't call that variant benign or pathogenic. It's just a variant of uncertain significance. You don't know. And so you end up in a setting where you have genotyped a human relevant to an inherited disease of interest, and you find this particular variant, but you don't know what to do with this particular variant because you don't know where this human's come from, right? So there's another example of how a piece of data that we could actually collect in the context of inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility actually will impact how we think about, in this particular case, patient care. Here's the third example. Let's go back to the COVID-19 pandemic, and you're running a survey on worker experiences in the first 3 months of the pandemic. And you were told by your research ethics board, your institutional research ethics board, that you can't ask a bunch of social identity or demographic questions because they're too invasive. Therefore, you don't ask them. But you get more than 10,000 responses to this survey on worker experiences. The problem ends up being that you can't ask questions about all of those social identities that you were not able to collect because you were told you couldn't collect them. But you are pretty sure they matter, right? And so now when we think about these kinds of things, this is fundamentally why inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility in STEM actually matters. Because at the end of the day, we're going to ask a research question, and we're going to design a research study to address the research question. And if we are not thinking about a segment of humanity, then we're going to leave out that segment of humanity in how we actually contemplate the data collection, how we contemplate the data analysis, how we contemplate the interpretation. And in the context of human-facing sciences, that absolutely will make a difference, right? If you want to think about things through a slightly different lens, think about what happens if in the context of, say, biodiversity, we're only collecting data from and data about flora and fauna in temperate climates as opposed to, say, tropical climates, because temperate climates is where the global north tends to sit, and so that's where we've actually got the genome centers of North America and Western Europe, and so we're going to do things only within this space because it's convenient, and so we're not asking questions, for example, about the rainforests. We're not asking questions about tropical environments, and so maybe we don't have answers because we're not asking questions. And so fundamentally, the premise of inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility in STEM is that we learn to ask more complete questions. We learn to ask more holistic questions. We learn to ask questions in such a way so that it is clearer that that we're intending to derive benefit that applies to as many people as possible, or we're intending to derive benefit that applies to the groups that we are particularly interested in, right? And so we often sort of deal with this issue of, science is egalitarian. Science is for everybody, right? So why should inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility matter in STEM? And it matters in STEM because if we don't pay attention to these things, what ends up happening is we're going to miss stuff. Our expansion and growth of knowledge will not be complete. We are going to learn things and interpret things that might be missing pieces, that might actually be factually incorrect, right? That are not applicable to some populations, right? And that's a problem, right? The challenge ends up being that because we sort of have this blinder on, pardon the expression, that effectively says that we're scientists, we are inclusive by default because we are scientists, right? Then what ends up happening is we don't think about the things that we might not be actually thinking about, right? We don't know what we don't know. We're not, what my old boss used to say, we're not aware of our own unconscious incompetence, right? And as a result, we're perhaps not asking. It's not even that we're not asking the right questions. We're not asking whole questions. We're not asking complete questions, right? And yeah, sometimes absolutely we might not be asking the right question, right? And so how we do science matters in the context of inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility. How we think about the question, how we think about data collection, how we think about the interpretation. Who's doing the science also matters. I fundamentally believe that persons with disabilities, persons who are English language learners, persons from different cultural contexts, persons from different backgrounds, from different lived experiences, will actually help us if we include persons like myself and like others in research teams, or when we include persons like myself and like others in research teams. I fundamentally believe we actually do better science, because I'm going to think about something that, Kate, you won't think about. It's because my lived experience is I grew up in the Caribbean and you grew up in not the Caribbean, right? And so just the fact that we come from different places and we have different mindsets, it means that we'll think about things differently. But if somebody had included me as a member of that research team doing the work on assistive technology in assistive technology use in older adults, I would have been the first one to say, okay, we've made this survey. How do we know that the people that we want to fill out the survey can actually fill out the survey, right? And when that incident, because that's a true story, it actually did happen. If somebody if somebody actually says, well, we don't know, and how do we figure it out, I would say, well, you test the survey. Let's understand if this survey is actually usable by that community. If it's not, we have to fix it, right? And so what ends up happening by including persons with disabilities, by including persons from marginalized or underrepresented groups within STEM, you have the other side of why IDEA in STEM is beneficial, which is we actually do better science, right? Because our inclusion means that we are able to think through things collectively as a research team that perhaps in our absence the research team wouldn't necessarily have been able to think of, right? So number one, we ask more complete questions. Number two, we do more complete analyses. Number three, we think through problems in more complete ways. And then number four, you're actually imagining things that you wouldn't imagine if this person or this group of persons were not as part of your team. We don't tend to think about science like that, though, right? Science is this thing where anybody can do it, but we all do it the same way. And that's actually not true, because we all think differently. And we all come to an appreciation of what science is and how we do it and what its philosophy is through very different lenses. And those lenses, when they come together, equals the diversity of thought and the diversity of expertise that we prize so very much in the doing of science. But how many times do we create scientific workspaces that are so homogenous because we keep looking for clones of ourselves?
I definitely haven't worked with clones of myself in America. I have to say, I was definitely the only European in the labs that I worked in.
Well, I've actually seen labs in Canada where it was quite clear that the PI cloned themselves in the creation of the lab.
Oh wow!
Like from a thought process point of view, from an ideology point of view, from a even a lived experience point of view, I have actually seen labs like that, right? And absolutely, not every lab is going to be like that, right? And many labs are not. But what we end up doing is we end up throwing grad students and postdocs together in this quasi-Darwinian competition to see who comes out on top. The problem ends up being that in those labs, in those spaces, the decks are already stacked.
You're being very cynical right now, Mahadeo.
I don't know. I would consider myself more pragmatic and realistic, right? I mean, there's nothing that's gained from not acknowledging the world the way it is.
Yeah, okay. I can
Right.
see that.
because acknowledging the world the way it is helps us understand how to make it the way we want it to be.
True. Okay, so thank you for joining us today. Okay, so in the next video, I'll be asking him about the IdeaSTEM tagline, inclusive science is good science. So check back in to hear what he tells me about that. Thank you for joining us today. Please like and subscribe to both my channel and the IdeaSTEM channel. And we will see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.